Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this is our 13th podcast. And today we got a very special program for you. You know, normally my format has been to have 2 or 3 various conversations throughout the podcast, and today there's 3 guests, but 1 recording. It's a special opportunity with the Martin family, Freddy Martin, Christopher Martin, and Michael Martin. And this is really a special time. The podcast will be without stop, and before we get going, I just want to do a shout out to my sponsors. I want to thank the Eastman Musical Instrument Company. They make great horns. They got a variety of wonderful products, and they were instrumental in urging me to get this podcast started, so I owe them a great deal of gratitude. I want to thank our friends at Hal Leonard Corporation, publishers of the Essential Elements Band Method, of which I am honored to be a co-author. The Essential Elements Interactive website is free for users. It is fantastic. It has just exploded during the coronavirus time, and we hope that people are enjoying it, and I know that the company is working very hard to keep developing it and providing you with more features. And finally, to my friends at Vandercook College of Music. I spent 23 years at Vandercook. It's an incredible place. They do such a terrific job of just filling in the cracks for music teachers. If you have a student that wants to be a music teacher, a band director, choir director, general music teacher, orchestra director, there really is no better place that I can ever imagine. Our students leave so grounded. They leave so well prepared. And I'm just so proud of the work they do. The summer graduate program is fantastic, so practical. And the Mecca Continuing Education Program has a variety of online courses. Their director, Patrick Benson, is doing a fantastic job. It's a wide array. It's practical. It's there for you. And I really hope that you'll support Vandercook College of Music. So those are the commercials. And let's get to the podcast. And without any further ado, here's our conversation with Freddy, Christopher, and Michael Martin. So every once in a while in your life, you hear about somebody from people that you really respect and trust. And I was a young band director, and I used to get the chance to do some judging and hang out with people like Herb Melanie, who was with the Florida Festival Parade of States, and Bob Buckner, and Jay Bocook, and Bruce Burritt. And they kept talking about this guy from Georgia, this Freddy Martin guy. And all they could do is just be amazed at what a great teacher and what a great individual he was. And I didn't really know who they were talking about. And then a few years later, I had the opportunity to meet Freddy Martin in person. And the only thing I can react to what they told me was they way understated it. I mean, this guy is amazing, and he is the real deal. And joining us on Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends today is the man himself, Mr. Freddy Martin, and his 2 terrific sons, Christopher Martin, who is principal trumpet of the New York Philharmonic, and Michael Martin, who is playing trumpet in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
We appreciate being invited. Thank you, Charlie.
My pleasure. Yep.
So Freddy, you've been teaching a long time. So give us a quick rundown of your career.
A quick rundown. Well, I graduated from Jacksonville State in August of 1969, and I started teaching at South Cobb High School a week later. Spent 10 years at South Cobb. We built a very nice program. Joe and I did. Turned out to be in a high school of about 900 kids. We had about 290 in the total band program. Those were special years. Then about 6 years into that, we started investigating what DCI might be willing to do for a show in the South, because in those days drum corps didn't come further south than Kentucky. When we finally got that all put together in 77, 76 actually was the first show. The TV station that was sponsoring the show was so excited they wanted to do a drum corps. They sponsored their own drum corps. And that's what became the Spirit of Atlanta. And I've been with the Spirit of Atlanta basically ever since then in some capacity or another. Getting to know Jim Ott, we just had a discussion with our core kids last night virtually about Jim Ott and what he contributed to not only the whole activity, but especially the Spirit of Atlanta. Getting to know him and Tom Float and Dave Bandy and a number of people on that side. But the folks that you mentioned in your intro, Bob Buckner and Bruce Burrett, folks like that, have always influenced me. They've always been great friends. We've always been really fortunate. It's been a really enjoyable 50 or so years of teaching band and drum corps.
So are you responsible for starting Chris and Michael playing the trumpet?
I'm afraid that I have played guilty for the most part. Actually, Chris started on French horn because his dad's a horn player. And, one thing I tell people all the time is don't teach your kids privations and don't teach your wife how to drive. And if you do those two things, normally you're going to come out okay. We've always talked about playing. We've always consulted about it. I hope that I've been reasonable in some ways with them in the way they approach not only their instrument but their lives. So yeah, I guess I would have to plead guilty to the trumpet thing, even do my best to get them to play a real instrument.
So did you have to encourage them to practice as youngsters?
No, Linda and I decided that the best thing for them would be to be treated like normal people rather than band director kids. And so basically, I hope that we stuck to this, that it was up to them. What they wanted to accomplish was the most important thing to us. And they were able to study with teachers. They were able to do the things they wanted to do. The only thing I ever asked of them is if they were studying privately and they had a 1 hour lesson each week, that they practice for an hour each day outside that lesson, because that would get them the most out of that particular lesson. So no, I don't think there was any pressure, but they can probably answer that better than I.
So Michael, was he the demanding band director father, go to your room and practice or else, or was he pretty cool with it?
No, it was he and mom both, whatever we said our goals were, they helped us stay the course for those goals. And if we committed to doing something, then we saw it through. So it was never you have to go practice for the sake of practicing because I'm your parent and also your band director. It was never like that. But I remember when I was in 8th grade, and Dad was teaching at Buford Middle School and high school. I had auditioned for honor band in All-State the year before in 7th grade, and it was like 14th chair in honor band and didn't make All-State. Said the next year that I really wanted to make the All-State band, and I wanted to do whatever it took to make that happen. And so that meant so Dad volunteered basically his lunch break and my lunch period every day for like 4 or 5 weeks. And we worked through the All-State etudes when I was in 8th grade. And I mean, there were sweet. Dad probably remembers, like we had some contentious moments where like he knew what it was going to take for me to accomplish that goal, and I all of a sudden didn't want to put that kind of work in. And but we kind of got through those hurdles, and I practiced really hard, and we got to the end of it. So, and then the actual quick funny story about this is that audition, the etudes went great. The technical sight reading went great, and my scales were great. And then the lyrical sight reading, I played it and it went really well. But then I looked back at the metronome marking and realized it had said eighth note equals this or quarter note equals this, and I thought I had misinterpreted the rhythm and had totally blown it. And I came out in tears and was devastated and thought I had just worked so hard for 5 or 6 weeks and Dad had invested all this time that I just blew it and wasn't going to get into All-State. And then we find out 2 weeks later that not only did I get in, but I was first chair in the state. And it was, so that to me was like that's the first time the biggest that a light bulb that big clicked and was like, oh, if you practice the right way, you know, the sky's the limit. So
that's a great story. Yeah, that is a great story. So Chris, you were 9 when you first started to play the trumpet, or was it the horn and then you switched to trumpet? So what made you switch?
The notes weren't high enough and they were too close together.
So do you remember the brand and make of your first trumpet?
Yeah, it was a Yamaha. It was I can't remember the number anymore now, but it was a lacquer Yamaha B flat, and we still have it. And it was a good horn. It's still a good horn. I was home last year sometime and I found it and pulled it out, and the valves don't work very much anymore. We haven't kept it in good shape, but it still plays. It still plays pretty good. Plays better in tune than a lot of trumpets I've played on. I played horn for about 2 weeks, as I recall. It wasn't much more than about 2 weeks. And they were 2 contentious weeks. I think by the time I had to switch to trumpet, Dad and I weren't speaking much at the dinner table. So.
and so, Michael, you're 10 years younger than Chris, correct?
Yep.
And how old were you when you started playing the trumpet?
I was 10. I think it was the summer after 5th grade. And in Georgia, we start band in 6th grade, beginning of middle school. And I think Chris was home, so Chris would have been 90. That would have been 95. So you were halfway through your time at Eastman, and I wanted to start playing, and I used that same Yamaha student lacquer horn, and Chris kind of taught me a few exercises and how to hold the horn, and so between Chris and Dad, I kind of got started that summer a little bit. I remember I was obsessed with I wouldn't hold the valve casing with like this. I had to put my finger over the bell. Like that was the only way I felt comfortable playing. I remember that, and then got that beaten out of me in middle school. But yeah, I think I spent like 3 or 4 weeks right before school started learning how to play. So
how old were you when you got your first trumpet?
So I had that Yamaha until 8th grade, and then my big Christmas present in 8th grade was my first box Strad, a B flat box Strad, and I was the kid. I wore gloves when I played it. I polished it 6 times a day. Like it was yeah. That thing it was. And that's the horn that's the horn I still play. So in the orchestra and in pops and everything. So.
So Chris, I remember correctly, you graduated from Sprayberry High School, and your Uncle Dan was your high school band director, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And Freddy, where were you teaching during this time?
I was teaching drum corps, and I was in sales and marketing because we were in between careers then. Basically, my wife and I were running a sales business and trying to finance what needed to be done for ourselves, but especially for the boys and their education. Because in Georgia, you know, when I started teaching at South Cobb in '69, our annual pay was $7,500, including the band director supplements. So, 10 years later, we'd screamed all the way up to like 11,000.
So Chris, what do
So,
you remember most from your high school band experience with your uncle?
I remember, well, for a lot of those years, it was Dad was there too, teaching the brass, and teaching brass in the marching season, but also in the concert season too. So it was a family affair. My aunt was involved with teaching flute players, and also with the color guard too. So it was I remember one of my fondest memories is that it was family, surrounded with family all the time. But I also remember that the band program I had been a part of in middle school was not particularly strong. It was a small program, not a lot of interest from the students of the community. Or I'm trying to be diplomatic here.
Sure.
So moving to Sprayberry in a band that was large and had a tradition of winning competitions and top rankings at festivals, and a lot of students had graduated and gone on to study music in college and had become band directors themselves, had played. So it was that was the first time I felt a real pride in being a part of an ensemble. So that's something that sticks with me. So that, and I really learned how to be competitive in music in a positive way. And that's something I talk to students about these days a lot too, is that, you get into music because you love to play your instrument, or you love a certain piece of music that you heard. And then almost right away you're looking at auditions and chair placements and competitions. And so I remember learning from Dan and from the Sprayberry band program that competition is important, but to look at it in a healthy way. And at the end of the day, all that really matters is that you're trying to improve yourself, trying to improve the band, the show, try to make it the best you can. And the placement you get at the end, or the color of the medal, doesn't really matter as much.
So when did you decide you wanted to pursue a career in music?
I was a little bit, honestly, Charlie, I was a little slow on the trumpet. I had a decent sound pretty early, but technique came a little slow later. Strength and power, those high notes I really wanted to play, came a little later. So I was probably 16. It was probably about my junior year of high school before I really thought, I'd wanted to play from the time I started playing. I loved to play the trumpet. I probably loved baseball more when I first started, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. But as I grew older, I loved it more. And the more I learned about the repertoire from my longtime teacher and Mike's longtime teacher, Larry Black, the more I fell in love with it, the more I knew I wanted to do it. But I would say probably 15 turning 16 is when I really decided.
So then you decided to study at Eastman. So what was the impetus for that decision?
It was really just dumb luck, honestly. I got really lucky because I wanted to go to Northwestern, where Larry, our longtime teacher, had gone. I'd planned to go to Northwestern. I'd worked really hard in high school. I'd taken AP classes and tried to get the best grades I could to try to get into Northwestern, so that I could study with Vince Chikowitz, who had taught there for many decades. Was longtime second trumpet, of course, in the Chicago Symphony with Herseth. And I wanted to be a part of that tradition and learn from him, because he had taught everybody that I admired and respected, or had played with everybody I admired and respected. But as it turned out, I'd also applied to Eastman, and that was it. Pretty much just those two schools, maybe one more. But because Larry had said, you should apply, because I know Charlie Geyer and I know his wife Barbara. They're great, but you should go to study with Vince. So anyway, long story short, I got into both schools, fortunately. And I had signed my acceptance to Northwestern, and I was about to send it. And Charlie Geyer called us and said, "You need to hold off. Let us talk to you for a couple of days." So they explained that, the situation at Northwestern was not exactly what we thought. Vince is still there, but getting ready to retire. And it was a little bit uncertain in the trumpet studio. So as it turned out, I just got incredibly lucky. And fortunately, Charlie and Barbara reached out and pretty much saved me from not a bad decision, but not the best decision for me.
A life-changing decision for you, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. The fit for me with Charlie and Barbara was then perfect, and still to this day is I still text with Barbara and talk on the phone with her a lot. I'll ask her a question about rep, or if I'm like having an issue with my pick playing or articulation, I can always talk to her, and she's still my coach and mentor. So I feel very lucky that worked out for Mike as well.
Yeah, Michael. So when you were in high school, your Uncle Dan retired after your sophomore year, correct?
Right.
And so any memories of your high school experience that stand out?
Yeah. So dad, as he said, was in sales for a long time, and we ended up moving to the district where Sprayberry was in. And so when I was in middle school, I was at Simpson Middle School in Cobb County, and until 7th grade, when Dad, on a sales trip to a school about an hour away from where we live, I think he knew the principal, and somehow had a history of a history friendship with the principal at the time, and had a conversation about the band director opening at Buford High School where they were, and Dad ended up getting back into teaching there, and it was a K through 12 district, so it was Buford Elementary, middle, and high school. So he had 6th grade through 12th grade, and that meant that you could kind of start in the marching band before you got to high school in 8th grade. And I, growing up in drum corps and marching band and watching Chris with the Sprayberry marching band and all that, I was like kind of obsessed and wanted to do that. So I actually went to Buford with Dad. Dad started teaching there in 97, and I went there in 98 and spent 8th, 9th, and 10th grade there until Dad applied for and got the band director job where he still is at the Westminster Schools in Atlanta. And that was around the same time that Uncle Dan retired. And that year that he announced his retirement was pretty special, because a lot of my friends that I had grown up with in elementary and middle school went to Sprayberry because we all lived pretty close, and were in the band. And a few of them, like we had done honor band and all state and youth orchestra and stuff together. And so we were friends kind of tangentially around the music world in Cobb County at the time, but I didn't go to school with them. So I hadn't really seen a lot of these kids in 3 years, which when you're 15 years old is a lifetime. So when Uncle Dan retired, I kind of asked my parents if I could play on his last concert and at that festival. And of course they said yeah. And so I ended up just like after school when he would have evening rehearsals, I'd go sit in with Symphonic Band 1, I think it was, and we played through the festival rep, and that was going to be his last concert. So I, being a part of that was great. And I remember we ended the concert, we did the Moldau. I can't remember the middle piece or what the march was. And then we did the Moldau, and then we did Festival Variations by Claude T. Smith, which is just one of the hardest and most amazing things ever. So that was really cool, actually to be there and to to watch Uncle Dan kind of end his career at Sprayberry, and it's an amazing career that it was, and to be a part of it, but also still have the opportunity to be in Dad's band. It was cool. It was an emotional time, obviously, because none of the students wanted Uncle Dan to retire. But it was the right thing for him, and to be able to be a part of it was really special.
So when did you decide you were going to go into music?
Growing up with Chris Martin practicing in the house when you're 9, 10, 11 years old doesn't hurt, in terms of influencing what you want to do. But I think the moment I knew I wanted to play the trumpet was the summer of 1993. Actually, I was 8 years old, 7 years old, and I saw Jurassic Park and heard that trumpet solo when the helicopter's flying in, and I was like, I want to make that sound. How do I make that sound? And then Chris was graduating high school at the time and was about to go to Eastman, and so that was always a bug in my ear to want to do that. But like Chris said about also like really enjoying baseball and sports in general, like our parents were encouraged us pursue anything that we were interested in, and they would do their best to make it happen. So I've been playing golf since I was 3. I really loved golf. That's probably like a close second behind the trumpet. Was playing basketball and soccer and baseball, and so I was into all of those things. But I think it was about probably my I think 8th grade, when Chris won his job in the Philadelphia Orchestra. He started there in the fall of '97. Right? Is that right? Fall of '97?
Yep.
It would have been.
Yeah, that's right.
So my first time seeing Chris play was, I was in 7th or 8th grade, and we drove up to Carnegie Hall to watch him play Mahler 2 with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I had been to orchestra concerts before that, but I'd never seen, and I'd probably seen Chris play a couple of recitals at Eastman, but Mahler 2 and Carnegie, with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and Wolfgang Spalisch was conducting. When you're 12 years old and you already love music, I mean, that was the tipping point. We listened to the symphony on the way up, and I had never even listened to it before. We were listening to recording from London Symphony recording in the car on the way. And after that concert, I've always looked up to Chris, but like after that, it was like, he was a rock star to me, and still is to this day.
About time. It was about time.
So Michael, you graduated from high school. Chris has already graduated from Eastman. He's had a fellowship in the New World Symphony. He's played with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and now he's the principal trumpet with the Atlanta Symphony. So were you feeling any pressure by your brother's success?
No, what's great. I mean, what's great is for me, whenever my friends from school and my friends in other orchestras that I've known for a long time that come from families that weren't involved in music, and they don't have siblings or parents, or extended family, aunts and uncles that are not just involved in music, but really great at teaching and playing. I always look to them with incredible admiration, because I feel like I had a cheat sheet. I still had to put all the work in, but it was laid out in front of me to, like, it's going to be really hard, but here's what you do if you want to be successful, and if you want to play in an orchestra, this is it. So, but my parents and my teacher, in middle and high school, Larry Black, they all, I think, like, they made it a point to reinforce to me that I should not feel pressured to do this just because my brother did it, and also that just because Chris had success doesn't mean that that's going to be my path, and that it may not happen. So I think everyone was very cautious, including Chris and mom and dad, and to say, like, if you want to do this, then absolutely do it, but don't feel like you have to just because your brother did. So I felt very supported and very looked after. But in terms of pressure to succeed based on what Chris had done, it was kind of like a different side of that coin of actually feeling empowered to follow that same track, as long as I put the work in, that I would have a really good shot at being successful.
So Chris, Michael chooses to attend Northwestern, where Barbara Butler and Charlie Geyer are now the trumpet professors, right? Yep. And they were your teachers at Eastman. So when Michael chose Northwestern, what advice did you give him about studying with Barbara and Charlie?
Yeah, I did. We didn't really have to give him a lot of advice, to be honest. I mean, I would say two things too about Mike, and also about the way we grew up. Mike was a sort of a in a way a typical second, younger brother, but in that he went his own way from the beginning. And even though we play the same instrument, we have similar lives in music, but he really has gone his own way in so many ways that I did not. And when we'll get to all this, I'm sure, with composition and writing and arranging and drum corps. But he was that way from the beginning. So, I had a little concern when he said he wanted to play the trumpet professionally, but honestly, the more I thought about it, I just thought, he's going to find his way no matter what he does. And as far as when he went to Northwestern, I gave him I gave him, sort of the typical big brother advice, you know, practice hard, don't party too much, all that stuff, but I also told him, I told him that, that when you study with Charlie, you get a lot of wisdom and you get a lot of stories. And so, especially stories, you'll get a lot of stories about the CSO and Bud Herseth and his great career that Charlie had. But you'll get the most out of it if you ask a lot of questions. And if you come prepared, and if you're curious and you're always kind of asking more. And I think that's true for any student. I know that the students I've had who I love to teach are the ones who come in always curious and always with questions and always pushing me. So you said this, and do you really think it that way? Would you really tongue that way in this situation? Those are the kinds of students that I think excel above and beyond anybody else.
So, Michael, I know you've been very involved in teaching on a variety of fronts since you graduated. Was being a performer always at the top of your list, or did you ever think about maybe being a music teacher when you first went to school?
It was playing was always at the top, and I actually didn't really find, and I love teaching now, and I can't imagine my life without the opportunity and the privilege to teach now. But I really didn't find that until my summer after my freshman or sophomore year in college, when I came home and trying to make a little extra money and was teaching band camps with Dad at McEachern High School, and that was really my first experience with teaching in a way that you got kind of direct feedback of whether what you were saying was having any effect. So I think that awakened that maybe part of me that was laying dormant on the teaching side, certainly, but it informed how I practiced going forward as well. So it ended up being this very mutually beneficial kind of partnership between the two of really yearning to go teach, and it would either be marching band or drum corps for the most part when I was a teenager and into my later college years. But I found that if I listened honestly to what I was hearing, no matter whatever group was in front of me or what student was next to me, and gave them honest feedback, that they would utilize it, and you could instantly hear a difference, and that really informed a big change in how I practiced, and I started getting a lot more diligent about recording myself and doing the same thing, and I basically would start to give myself lessons, and so I found just even still this past year, spending a year as a visiting professor at the University of Texas, teaching some phenomenal students there. The demonstrating and I know Chris can speak to this as well, teaching at Juilliard, like the demonstrating and the honest listening that you have to do to your student and to yourself, and in order to show them not just the right way to do it, but oftentimes maybe going to an extreme version of the right way of doing something. It hones your ears in a way that I think just playing and just staying behind your own bell never really does.
So Freddy, what are you thinking when all this is happening? I mean, your first son's playing principal trumpet at the Atlanta Symphony, and your second one's off to Northwestern to be a performance major. What's going through your mind at this time?
It was wonderful having Chris literally 15 minutes from the school where I was teaching, rehearsing with ASO. We had a fairly open schedule at Westminster in those days, so there were days that I was able to go to rehearsal, and then we would have lunch, and get to enjoy each other in special ways, professionally and personally.
Okay Cafe.
Yes, OK Cafe is one of those things, and missing Mike, of course, he's left and at Northwestern, and that was that left a space. But Chris had been gone and come back, and now Mike was gone, and all we could hope was that it would all work out for them to be what they wanted to be. But for me personally, it was just dreamy
So
that
let's go.
that your sons would actually, sort of follow in your footsteps professionally at a much higher level.
Yeah. So let's back up a second. So you go back to starting the Spirit of Atlanta Drum and Bugle Corps. So what was your motivation for doing that?
That was an interesting thing. My brother and I used to take a busload of students, Trailways busload of students, into the Midwest in the latter middle summer so that they could see drum corps. And we wanted them to see what that level of professionalism and what that level of musical discipline and physical discipline could do for their ensembles. And it worked beautifully. It really helped both band programs spring forward in a way that other programs in this area weren't, because it's not something to see live easily. So I wrote DCI letters for a few years about having a show in Atlanta. And finally, I think it was Christmas of '75, I went to the meeting, the winter meeting in Chicago, and Don Whiteley and Pessioni and some of the other guys that were there at that time said, "Yeah, we want to expand the tour into the South, and we need someone to sort of anchor that part of the tour. Would you be willing to do that?" And what that meant was that we would need to find sponsors in Tennessee, Alabama, and heading back up through Arkansas to get the drum corps back into the Midwest, because they obviously couldn't afford to drive down here and do a show and then drive back. So the Crossmen, thank goodness, played a concert for Jeff Davidson and the TV people, and that's when they decided, let's have a drum corps. And I was there that day, right place, right time, and right contacts and people that I was really close to, really, were at the TV station. And so they asked me to direct the drum corps. So that was the beginning of the Spirit of Atlanta, which was originally called Drum and Bugle Corps of Atlanta, Georgia, Inc. Pretty classy, a lot of kids would have wanted to do that for sure. So,
Very creative.
yeah, the TV station literally had a contest for the kids in the drum corps to name it. And they gave away like TV sets to the people who came up with the three best names. And the best of the three was Spirit of Atlanta.
So Chris, you graduated high school in '93. And then you marched in Dad's drum corps that summer. So what was that like?
It was great fun. It was a fun show. It's kind of sort of a typical Spirit show. A lot of like Southern gospel. So it was growing up with it from before I could remember. I'd always wanted to wear the baby blues, and so again, it was a feeling of pride to be able to do it, and I got to play a solo in the show that year, and it was a classic drum corps experience. The Gatorade was super watered down, and everything we ate kind of tasted like peanut butter. This is one of those one of those years. It's never like there's never enough money for food. There's never enough money for anything. It's like, is the bus going to make it? Probably is going to make it, but if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. It was one of those summers. It was great. It was musically a ton of fun. It was great to be with Dad all summer before going to college. It was, again, and I've said this in every forum that I'm ever asked about drum corps, that there was no other performing ensemble that gave me that much experience playing in front of people until I got to my first job in the Philly Orchestra. There was nothing in high school. There was nothing in college. As great as Eastman was, I never played that many concerts in front of an audience as I did in drum corps. And the only thing that was truly, when it comes to just performing night after night, getting up and doing it again, that was the best prep I had for 4 concerts a week in an orchestra.
I don't remember the year it was, Freddie, but I want to say I was at Warhawk Stadium in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and I was there for a drum corps show, and the Spirit of Atlanta were there, and I'll never forget when you opened up with Let It Be Me and you moved those bleachers back about 25 yards. What year was that?
Oh, we played Let It Be Me in 79, 80, 81, 82, 80. You know, the kids had a name for it each year. You know, Let It Be Me 2 again, Let It Be Me 2 the third time. But I think the year you're talking about was Jim was still alive, and
Yes.
we were teaching the brass line together. And that was the night that he rewrote the end of Let It Be Me in the warm up and taught it in the warm up. And if you noticed, we came running into the stadium and running down the stairs at the left end of the Whitewater Stadium. Thank goodness the color guard was in place, so we didn't get a penalty. And the horn players never stopped. They just ran right onto the field and got ready to do the show. And honestly, that performance of Let It Be Me that night in Whitewater may to this day be the single most emotional performance I've ever heard kids do, just for that one tune. And it was so good, and the ending was so wonderful that I was at the top of the stands, and as loud as the drum corps played, I couldn't hear anything they were doing for the crowd noise. So, yeah, it was a special time for
That
sure.
was awesome. That was great stuff. Yep. Michael, did you ever march drum corps?
Yeah, I did. I marched in Spirit of Atlanta in 2000. I played a bugle, and then in 2001 I played an F mellophone. So that the year of the switch over from G bugles to any key. So I was I got to play, you know, the old era and the new era. So and then I took a couple of summers off and went to Interlochen and to do quote unquote serious trumpet and orchestral stuff, getting ready to go to Northwestern. And then I marched the summer after my freshman year of college. I marched in 2004 with the Phantom Regiment, and then I aged myself out and then pursued orchestra festivals for the summers after that.
So your brother Chris beautifully articulated how the transfer from playing in drum corps has helped him in the professional world. You feel the same way?
Yeah, it's you know, that's not only the performance experience, which is infectious and just gets into your blood and you crave. You know, when a performance is really on and everyone's on the same page, and you can feel the energy connecting, you know, yourself to everyone else on the field. That's what being a pro, like that's the closest feeling to being a pro that anyone could ever hope to have, you know. And so, and even that can be fleeting at times, you know, playing in the orchestra, because it's addictive. Like you get that kind of feeling, and it drives you to want to get to the next plateau and get to the next plateau and get to the highest level of what you can do, because you don't experience anything like that until you've had that in drum corps. But also, you know, you're so inundated with fundamentals all the time. And I was fortunate to play in my dad's horn lines, and then with JD Shaw at Phantom Regiment. So, you know, my drum corps pedagogy as a player was as good as it could be, you know. Getting that kind of feedback and exposure to guys like Sam Palacian and Pat Sheridan when I was there at Phantom Regiment, I mean, it's, you know, it was great. It was great, and that also for me planted a seed of my brother marched drum corps, and you know, Chris, I think you were at Eastman with JD, weren't you? Wasn't JD?
Yeah, we played in a brass quintet together. Yeah,
Chris and JD Shaw played, you know, we're at Eastman at the same time. And that was kind of what drew me to the Phantom Regiment, was that, you know, their orchestral tradition and knowing that some, like an incredible horn player and pedagogue was there running the show, you know. So, and then Dad got involved with Phantom Regiment when I was there too. So, you know, in terms of preparation for playing professionally, absolutely. It was huge.
So Freddie, you've been a part of education for over 40 years. And in addition to your teaching, You work with school bands from coast to coast. You've judged, you've directed drum and bugle corps. I mean, you name it in the band world, and Freddie Martin's probably done it. So what things have you observed or realized by being the father of two professional musicians who are at the top of their game? What have you observed that has made you a better teacher?
Trumpet players are annoying.
Especially principal trumpet players. Section players are good, but principal trumpet players. Oof.
That's I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I heard recently that you're a parent up to a certain child, up to a certain age for your child, basically high school graduation, and then you become a mentor, friend, that sort of relationship change. Then when the students become, or your children become steeped in their profession, then you have an opportunity to learn. And I think we have exchanged information, the three of us, as well as anyone could have. I'm much better teacher today than I was when they came through school. And a great portion of that is our discussions, is learning from them, of hearing the things that they say and they do and they accomplish. When they were in school, I used to go to lessons with them. I don't know if that was embarrassing for them, but I was paying for it, so I wanted to get as much out of this situation as possible. So I would go in and listen to Charlie Geyer teach, or I would go in and Gail Williams is right down the hall. I could go sit and listen to what she's doing in a French horn lesson. Go listen to a bass trombone lesson with Charlie. All of those things combined in our relationship have created an opportunity for me to improve myself as a teacher, which is something that I hope everyone wants to do all the time. And I was fortunate enough, I hope, to be able to have improved myself in I was living a dream. Because for years people have said, what is it like to have two sons who play in major symphony orchestras? And I've always said it's dreamy, truly dreamy.
So let's change gears here for a minute. Chris and Michael, you've both played under the baton of many, many great conductors. So when a conductor steps on the podium, what do you expect? Let's start with Michael. What do you expect, Michael?
Well, I can tell you what I hope, what I hope for. I've been in the Boston Symphony for 10 years now, and played with every big name conductor that's been alive in the last 10, 15 years has come through Symphony Hall. And the ones that I think get the greatest result and the greatest product from the orchestra are the ones that humble themselves before the music, not before us necessarily, because we're there. The thing about this orchestra that I love so much is everyone really wants to do whatever is on our stand the justice, like to the nth degree, and can be, especially string players, can get really offended if the conductor it isn't doing that. When it comes to Beethoven and Mozart and Brahms, like there are some very, very stout opinions in the front of the orchestra, and it takes a rare conductor to kind of nail that and get it right. But the ones I feel like do, like our music director Andres Nelson's, is he cares about the music more than anything else and conveys what he wants with an appropriate level of humility that is we sense instantly. And so we'll do anything he asks because he wants the music to be what it's supposed to be. So you want to, and to accomplish that as a conductor, they have to do their homework. Like we'll get conductors that are extremely talented or great soloists before they decided to become conductors, and they kind of coast on their talent a little bit, and they haven't really done the research and the hours and hours of score study and investigation to find out like why is this mezzo forte and not forte, or why is this melody in the violas instead of what there's all the litany of things that you have to know to be able to make. Sorry, that's my 5-year-old watching SpongeBob. That you have to.
I thought that was a conductor for a second.
Yeah, it's some of the better ones. Yeah, it's that's what I hope for is someone to come in with the humility that my colleagues and I do our best to bring, so that the music is there in a way that the composer intended and that the audience is going to connect with.
How about you, Chris?
No, that's all right. That's all right on. Two things, I think. One is exactly that, if you think about what it takes to play an instrument well, or to play a piece of music well on any instrument, it takes hours and hours every day, for weeks and months and years and years. And I think the same is true of being a great conductor, being a great leader in any way. And I think, so the great conductors are the ones who have studied and know the music and know the score so well that all that technical knowledge, it disappears, and you just have an experience performing, and you just have an experience playing this piece. And then the other thing I would say is my favorite conductors I've played for are also the most the most intense to play for, those that have the highest expectation. Again, not, as Mike said so well, not for themselves, and not for the players on the stage, but for the piece you're playing. I always think of, as hard as we've worked to play the trumpet, and as hard as we work to be directors, conductors, musicians. The real geniuses in this world are the ones who write these pieces that we play. And we should be confident in our abilities, but we should be humble before the kind of mind that can bring a Mahler Second Symphony, or a Beethoven, or a Thomas Adis, or John Adams. And so having my favorite conductors are the same. They have great confidence in their own ability, but they also have perspective and humility before the music that we're after that day.
So if we take those answers and that information, your thoughts that you just shared, is there any transfer that we can make over to a school band director? Like, what things should a school director try to emulate with their students that a professional conductor does with theirs? Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah. I always think anytime somebody acts like they have all the answers, I tend not to trust them. And I think that's true in music. It's true in life, or it's true in everything. Nobody has all the answers. And I tell my students when they come to me with a problem, and if I'm not sure, I'll tell them, I don't know. Let's try and figure it out together. Or I know, let me call Barbara and see what she would do in this situation. Or so I would say that we study as hard as we can. We work as hard as we can to be at as high a level of knowledge and performing and the ability to motivate others as we can. But at the end of the day, we also have to be humble. And to me, that's everything. And that's what we learned for growing up from both of our parents, that you should be confident, you should work hard, but you should also be humble. And, the best example of this personality I can think of is John Williams. If anybody on this planet has a right to be arrogant as they'd like and put anybody in their place, it would be him, given his experience and what he's done and achieved. But he is the kindest, sweetest, most humble human being I've ever met. And as my wife always says, if John Williams isn't arrogant, then nobody else on this planet should be.
I agree more. I had the opportunity when he was the Grand Marshal of the Tournament of Roses to be invited by the president of the Tournament of Roses to be there, and had a chance to meet him and actually sit at a table and have lunch with him. And I'm just so impressed. I was just, he's a rock star. You're so right. You're so right. Michael, how about you? What do you think that those high school directors should emulate?
Well, just to piggyback on the John Williams point, with a little anecdote, when Chris was in Chicago and had played a few film concerts with John, I, being Chris's brother, had the amazing privilege to get to go backstage all the time and go see him, and I got to meet meet John, and my parents did also. And so so the first time I ever shook his hand and got a picture with him was backstage at Orchestra Hall, outside the locker room. And just like he did with everyone, he shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and asked what I did. I told him I was a trumpet player at Northwestern, blah blah blah, and he did the same thing with my dad and my mom. And fast forward years later, so that would have been in 2005. I think it was 2011 or 12, my second year in the BSO. We played a film night at Tanglewood, and I wanted to go shake his hand before the concert. It was like, it was 7:45, about 15 minutes before we went on stage, and I went back and shook his hand and wanted to just tell him what an honor it was to play with him in the orchestra and all of that. And I didn't even tell him my name. I just said, look, I had a trumpet in my hand, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, it's great to see you. How's your brother doing? Is he still in Chicago?" And I said, yeah, he's doing great. Assuming like maybe the Chris Martin, Mike Martin trumpet connection was there. And then he looked at me again. He said, "And your dad's still teaching, right? Is your mom still singing in the chorus?" And my brain exploded, just completely exploded, because it's yeah. So anyway, sorry. That ties into the similar answer that Chris gave. If he is unequivocally the greatest film composer of all time, and arguably one of the great orchestral composers in the history of Western music. And what he always tries to do is improve himself. And I think the band directors that I respect the most, like my dad and our uncle, and all the teachers in our family, and also everyone I've had the privilege of teaching with in marching band and drum corps, what the best directors and with the best programs and the most successful programs all have in common is they are trying to improve themselves constantly, and that's the culture that they foster in their programs. And the humility to wake up every day and ask yourself what you can learn, not what you can teach other people, I think is what makes the best teachers the best teachers.
So earlier on, Chris, you mentioned you love baseball. So had being a professional trumpet player not worked out, what career path would you have chosen?
I really wanted to fly airplanes when I was a kid. It's really what I wanted to do. That would have been fun. But then I needed glasses when I turned about 13, so that was out. Turns out you can't fly a jet for the Navy if you can't see. And then after that, I went from that love to I really loved math. I loved science, and I thought I might have gone into something maybe in aerospace. Maybe I used to be completely fascinated with the space program and everything NASA did. I still am. So I might have tried for that. But then about that time I fell in love with music and the trumpet. So, I was going to say one more thing too about conducting and teaching, and just a nuts and bolts thing. The best conductors, and I'm sure Mike probably would agree with this. The best conductors in rehearsal, they always balance. They have a great sense of pace and time, and they always play music more than they talk. And they rehearse longer chunks. And they'll rehearse short chunks for brief moments, but then they always go back to rehearsing longer chunks of music. And I think that keeps players of every level and every age interested and engaged. We have conductors come in who they play and then they talk for 5 minutes, and then they play for 3 minutes, and then they talk for 5 minutes, it's very difficult even for professionals who are being paid to be there to pay attention. So.
I don't know if you have this same experience, Chris, in concerts, but when we'll get a conductor who is excited to tell you how much he or she knows about this piece, and we end up doing short snippets the whole way through and never long phrases. Maybe we run the piece once at the beginning, but then it's all just snippet, talk. We'll get to a Thursday night concert. It doesn't matter what the piece is. It could be Brahms 2. and I'll look over at Tom Siders and be like, "Do you feel like we haven't even played this yet this week?" And he'll be like, "Yeah, I don't feel like it feels like we're sight reading right now." I don't know if you have the same experience.
Same. Anytime we have a conductor who talks nonstop for 4 rehearsals, I always look at Joe and Joe, well, it'll be Thursday night dress rehearsal. So that's how it is.
So Michael, you've done a lot of things in your early life. You perform at the Boston Symphony, you teach drum and bugle corps, you organize events, you compose. I look at you and the family as the Renaissance man,
Yeah.
So with that in mind, if you had a chance to go back in time and hang with a musician or a composer, who would it be and what would you want to talk to them about?
I don't know about Renaissance man. I think I just have the most severe ADD of any of the Martins. But it would be for sure, I think, Leonard Bernstein, because he was, he transcended classical music and became, he was a rock star. But when you go back and watch, and the Philharmonic social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook have done this, posted a lot of old videos of Bernstein doing like youth concerts that they used to televise and things like that. He was so engaging, but backed up every bit of charisma and charm that he had with an even greater wealth of knowledge and experience, and was so, he was a brilliant pianist, an unbelievable composer, and then is the standard when it comes to Mahler, as a conductor. Like that's when you want to know how a Mahler symphony should go, you listen to Bernstein with the Philharmonic. And for him, and I've studied a lot of his music. I think people take West Side Story for granted because it's such a cultural, it is so universally loved across disciplines and cultures that Chris and I both have played the film score live with the movie going, and like sitting in the middle of all of that and playing your part and then listening to everything else that's going on that you miss when you just watch the film. It's John Williams has that same capacity, but Bernstein was able to capture that in a way that as an amateur composer, I just am constantly in awe of how he would craft and pace an effect that he was about to deliver, like the build up to the mambo dance. It sounds like fun and jazzy and it like almost like a pop tune. So you take it for granted a little bit, but when you dig in and look at the score and really hear everything that's going on, I mean, the entire West Side Story score to me is every bit as brilliant as a Rite of Spring, or a Prokofiev symphony, or Mahler. It's just it's so entrenched in our culture that we take it for granted. So for sure, if I could just hang for like an hour or 6 and pick someone's brain, it would be Bernstein.
So Freddie, we alluded to your wife Linda, the boy's mom Linda, a couple times, and as I remember, she sings with the Atlanta Symphony Chorus, correct? And
yes.
And so together, you guys have raised 2 incredible young men who have gone to be at the top of their games. She obviously has been at your side the whole way. She's president and founder of your fan club and all that good stuff. So if you had to write her a thank you note at this point in your life, what might that thank you note say?
How long is this podcast? I'll be here a while.
Yeah.
Actually, it is several sentences. Recently, I went to the card shop and bought the Mother's Day card and was all set to do what I was supposed to do. And the night before, when I was going to sit down and do that, couldn't find the card. So I decided to create my own. So if y'all will be patient for a moment, I will tell you pretty much what I said to her about Mother's Day.
Love it.
Basically, what it says is, Linda, all thanks to you, Mom. Our children are strong, attractive, joyous, and fun. They have the confidence to accomplish anything they choose. They are complete in themselves and totally loving. Our kids are now challenged beyond anything they could have expected. They work and focus and find a way. That's what their mom would do. So that's what they do, tirelessly, grinding on through whatever difficulty may pass their way, because they have had the greatest example of how to any child could ever hope for. You have built the cornerstone of their character and personality. It is you challenging them to be specific, determined, and correct. Have character, feel the goodness to their very soul. Be determined, correct. Sorry. Continue to work hard and do the right thing just because it is the right thing. Thank you, Mom.
That's beautiful, buddy. That's great. So she's still crying on that one?
She's sitting here controlling herself beautifully. She always does, but the emotion's there for sure.
So guys, to wrap this up, and I can't thank you enough for giving an hour of your life to sit down and have a conversation. So to wrap this up, let me ask you guys one final question. So when you think of Dad and you hear Freddie Martin's name mentioned out there, like you do often, what goes through your mind? What are you most proud of? Michael, let's start with you.
I've always admired and continue to, and I think I've taken a lot of this from him. His ability to navigate any situation with and know exactly what the right choice is to make. That's going to create the most benefit for the most people. And I think in addition to that, like, he's never been afraid of a challenge, or if there's an outside venture that he's either been interested in or approached about, if it's going to benefit people, and especially young people, he says yes without hesitation, and often, which my mom can probably also attest to, without checking his calendar to see if he's already committed to something else. So
why would you waste time doing that?
Well, yeah.
How about you, Chris?
So
I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead and finish.
No, yeah, that was it. I'm guilty of the same thing as I was going to say, but definitely that.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Dad's never stopped learning. He's as well read as anybody I know. And he's constantly learning how to teach better, how to teach music better, learning about brass. Yeah. Learning about, but he's also always learning how to be a better teacher, be a better motivator, to make himself a better educator. And that's what I learned from him early on, was to never stop studying, never stop trying to better yourself. And I also learned from him a really powerful tool when it comes to decision making, the pros and cons list. I don't think I've ever had a decision with Dad, including like, what should I buy a car or should I not buy a car? It wasn't a pros and a cons list. And it's really simple, but like every one of those things, we did it about when we were trying to decide if should we move to New York from Chicago. And my wife and I we made the pros and cons list, the Freddy list. And every one of those things at first seems obvious, but then it creates discussion, and then you think of something else in a more nuanced way. And so that's one tool that he's taught us over the years about thinking outside the box, thinking creatively, thinking analytically about problems. And so you put that together with also being sort of tirelessly self-educating, and he's been a fantastic mentor to us for all these years.
The Martin family, you are such an inspiration, and you have so enriched my life by getting the opportunity to know you and chat with you. And every time I get to be with you, I'm humbled. I truly am. You're wonderful people. God bless you. And thanks for giving up a day of your life, an hour of your life, to be with us on the podcast.
Thank you, Charlie, for giving us this opportunity.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Nice to see
Charlie,
you guys.
it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much, Charlie.
All I can say is, wow. That conversation I had with the Martins are just spectacular. I could listen to it again and again and again. And every time I hear it, I hear one more thing. I learn one more thing. I gain one more insight. They are such special people. So humble, so committed, so talented, so focused. Man, they are the real deal. I'll tell you what. I'm so honored to know them, and I love every minute I get an opportunity to spend with them. So I want to thank them very, very much for giving up an hour of their life together to be with us on the podcast. So that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Next week, we have two wonderful conversations. We'll begin with Jack Williamson, the retired director of bands at Central Michigan University. Jack had a terrific program at Central and was an outstanding director before he went to Central many, many years ago. You'll hear all about it. And then a conversation with John and Becky Warren of Mandan, North Dakota. A husband and wife duo that met at the Midwest Clinic. They are married to their bands and they are married to each other. And it's a wonderful conversation that they share with us. So I hope you'll tune in. And thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.